afternoon. Welcome. I have the big honor to welcome everyone. My name is Maria Corin. I am the Interim Academic Director for the Integrated Marketing and Communications Department in the Division of Programs in Business at the NYU School of Professional Studies. And I'm also a clinical associate professor where I have the privilege to teach our wonderful students. We have people joining us from outside of NYU, so I wanted to take the opportunity to give a very brief introduction to who we are. I'm so proud to say, we are a very diverse and global group of students, scholars, educators, and practitioners. And we believe that marketing and PR professionals have a big role to play in driving business growth. And we are responsible for influencing societies and economies in a positive way, in a just and equitable way. And we take that responsibility very, very seriously. We're a large group. We have approximately 1,200 graduate students, again, coming from all over the world. And we pride ourselves for being data-driven and human-centered. And we love our industry, being connected to our industry and industry leaders. And in that context, I'm so proud that one of our very esteemed faculty colleagues, Tariq Khan, hosts our Leadership in Changing Times series, and he always welcomes very impressive practitioners to join us to have conversations. So today I'm so proud to welcome Tariq Hassan from McDonald's, Chief Marketing and Customer Experience Officer. And before we get started, I am going to hand it over to our divisional dean, Dr. Martin Eric, who will also say a few words. Thank you so much.
That's a quick welcome. I'm so excited to have you all here in person and online. The School of Professional Studies is the place to bridge theory and practice, academia and industry. And it's these events, I think, that make us so special. We have very experienced instructors and professors that actually work during the day, teach at night. They bring the skills into the classroom to make you ready on day one, and invite amazing industry leaders. And so I really look forward to learning more today. So thank you again to the two of you, and enjoy, everyone. Thank you.
Good afternoon and good morning, good evening to people on the Zoom, wherever you are. I want to thank Maria and Martin for hosting us and being so gracious. Most importantly, I want to thank all the students for being here. This is going to be a learning experience. And I want to welcome our guest, Tariq Hassan, to NYU SPS. I know your time is very precious, and we want to make sure we get started right away for this leadership series. So first of all, I want to congratulate your parents for giving you such a beautiful name. I have a bias there. And
wait till making a podcast.
Yeah, Tariq versus Tariq, right? But people sitting in the audience, let's start with the leadership journey. Share your story from sitting in the classroom to being the chief marketing officer of chief brand steward of one of the most globally known brand. Walk us through the journey, what happened and how did you make it to this place?
First of all, let me say thank you for being here, to all of you. It's not a straight line journey, I can tell you that, nor was it frankly one that I could acknowledge by true design. In fact, even going into the IMC space, because I was a former IMC student at another university in the Midwest, who will remain unnamed. I was in Northwestern. And I actually didn't plan it. I talk about the funny thing happened on the way to law school. I was planning on going to decided I sort of want to do another 3 years of school. I knew I wanted to do something in the industry where I could have an influence. So it was during my time at Northwestern, I actually started to truly understand that time the changing landscape of market and how we were truly moving from an industry, had basal data, scanner data, a little bit of transaction data. It didn't really have data world you all live in terms of a first party data world, but also starting to understand the mix of marketing and how that came together, the true essence of what I actually was about. And much of the chagrin of my mentor, Don Schultz, who wanted me to actually go into consulting, and thought that agencies will be gone by now because the role of data was so dominant. He thought we would be in a place where the traditional ad agency wasn't wasn't gonna take place anymore, much to his chagrin. I fell in love with the intersection of strategy, consumer insight and strategy, and applying that to the creative outcomes and the communication outcomes. And so I disappointed him until I was going into advertising, which is where I started the first half of my career. Originally as an account person, but eventually found my way into account planning and strategy. And that was truly where I found my place is working in strategy and discovering I was actually far more interested in the question than I was how often. And frankly, the pursuit of the next question was really where I sort of found my interest, and then be able to find enough of that could actually then go back, working with clients to work with the business, but then go back to a creative space and say, how would I bring that to life in a way that connects with consumers. I did that for the first half of my career, both in domestic and international roles, working across pretty much every category you can imagine, including spending some time, you and I talked earlier, spending some time in international spaces. It's been a couple of years to Dubai before people were talking about where Dubai was back in the early 90s. And then, as often happens when people make the crossover from the agency world to the corporate world, it happened as a result of a relationship with a client who I had worked with, and he asked me to come and join them. And I joined HP at a very interesting time in one of the technology space. I joined them in 2008. 2007 was the first release of the first iPhone. Apps were somewhere around 2010, and we weren't really sure if these things would be on your phone. So you can imagine sort of the technology that was going on at the time. Again, can't tell you by the time. I happened to be in a category at a time when massive change was happening in our industry. I did that for about 5 years, and then I moved into financial services, which is kind of a strange leap. But I refer to that as my big data chapter. I went to work for Bank of America, leading brand strategy, leading all of our analytics and insights for the entire organization, but then running marketing for Merrill Lynch. And that was at a time when the industry was starting to discover self-directed trading, which was really, again, an opening of how you use the internet to democratize so many things that customers didn't have access to. And Bank of America at the time had every other house with the Bank of America product. So it was my first chance to play with big data at real scale. I then followed the same leader who brought me to HP. He got his first CEO role at Petco, Ron Nodlin, who was kind enough to say, I left the technology world. I'm going to be a CEO in the pet industry. I'm going to be a CEO in the pet retail industry. How do I beat Google and Chewy when I'm a brick and mortar business, and how do we compete in that world? And so what started as a consulting assignment with him, I fell in love with the business problem. And I think he knew that when he asked me to consult, because I think he knew me long enough that, I'd stay. So after about a month, he said, why don't you just stay and be my CMO? And so I did. I stayed for 3.5 years of a tremendous experience where I had a chance to take a traditional brick and mortar retail company and see an opportunity to reposition that company. We had, I think, around 14 quarters of consecutive loss. And we were new leadership, but brought in privately held to try and turn the company around. And I'm going to dwell on that one for a second. I'm going to give us some of the areas we'll get into. But I saw 3 things when I got to that company that I think are all really relevant to what I think IMC allows you all to learn. And the 3 things I saw were factually, we had 80% of our transactions taking place on a rewards card, and we were doing nothing with the data. I saw a customer audience that is enamored with their pets. Right? Those of you who haven't know what I'm talking about, they're like your family. Same emotional category, yet when you look at the category, we were just selling it back. We weren't actually connecting with our customers on the emotional. The third thing I saw, trying to figure out how exactly you beat the algorithm of Amazon or Chewy, was we had services. We had vet services we were expanding, we had training, we had group, which really meant I had a full health and wellness view of the pet. Which really meant if I take that data of 80% transactions on a card and a little bit of history on your pet and a knowledge of how much you love that pet, I could actually create a connected pet model. So that was the problem that became enamored to stay. And eventually that's what we did. We actually changed the name of the company, Petco Health and Wellness Company, repositioned from retail to becoming a health and wellness company. That's the journey they remain on. And I was fortunate enough to be part of the company. We took it public in 2021, which was a great experience. I guess I did a good enough job there that the folks at McDonald's decided I should come and join them. And again, it goes back to our industry, not only the work that you do, but who you do with, the relationships you develop. I had worked with both Chris Kempczinski, who's our CEO in the past, and Morgan Flatley, who's now the global CMO. They were asking her to move into that role with her predecessor in the US. So yeah, I had the opportunity to join there. So by no means sort of a straight line design. But I hope you also hear inside of that, you can move through industries by both playing in different areas of the industry, but also they're playing in different categories of the industry. And I think those things actually really help.
Great. Well, so we know that this was a loss for legal fraternity, but a gain for a marketing industry, which is wonderful. A lot of students here are potential future leaders, right? And we wish we knew at that time when we were students that how the corporate works. In this career, as you know, getting into a company is not difficult, but making the journey to the C-suite is challenging, right? So I'm sure you had peaks and valleys. And there are some unwritten rules which are more esoteric that only certain people can understand. How would you share your lessons learned as a leader to these young students, what they can learn from?
Well, ironically, I think you guys are actually instilling rules that it took me a little while to learn. If I think about the young people that work in my organization today, and that's that when I look at your age group and your cohort, you guys demand the ability to bring yourself and be who you are. I struggled with that early in my career, trying to navigate how to participate inside expectations of a corporation, whether that was as a functional leader, things I was trying to do to develop and learn myself functionally, but frankly also as an individual and as a diverse individual, and how to be successful inside an organization, to manage against expectations of the company, and the sacrifices that I found myself making at times of the expectations for myself. And so I would say, I think you guys have a great head start because inherently in this generation, that importance of self is already present in a much stronger way than I think younger generations. And I would say, keep it, because I think it's helping us as cultures and as corporate cultures learn how to change in a good way. And then like I said, I think what I would tell you to do is put the roadmap down. There is no GPS straight line to the C-suite. There are things you're going to do and experiences you have. And so even as a company today, we talk about not managing your career, but managing experiences. Because when I grew up, the belief was you went into an area and you grew vertical. You just moved to the next level and kept moving. That's frankly out of date. Today, what we're looking to do as we develop our talents, have people move across the organization, learn their experiences, even leave organizations and come back, leave markets and come back. And I think that's because of the breadth of thinking that we're looking to try to open up inside of our folks. I do think it's also one of the powers, and I am going to brag out about IMC a little bit. I do think it's one of the powers of the way you guys are learning how to do what IMC does. I think it provides you with a different way to think about the breadth of the marketplace. But I didn't learn some of those things till late. And then I would say there's some functional things. I wish I had sort of grabbed onto some mentors earlier in my career, and mentorship, gang, comes in a lot of different forms to find them earlier. Particularly if you're doing well. I think I grew up in a generation that when you were doing well, you're good. Just keep moving, right? Mentorship is to solve, coaching is to solve. I don't agree with that. I think you really don't. You need a mentor to help you with both continue to strengthen your strengths, but also be aware of your weak spots. Mostly so you don't spend disproportionate times in the wrong place. I'm a big believer of somebody where you focus on your strengths than spending a lot of time on your weaknesses. And then I would say, like, the biggest thing is don't assume predetermined destinations, but also don't predetermine the experiences you think you're going to get going into something. I can tell you in each of those chapters I just described to you, definitely had highs, definitely had lows, but in all of them, I can tell you that walking away from them, I ended up with experiences I would have never thought going into it. So if you go in with that predetermined mindset, it's a little bit like reaching your own IMC goals, right? Assuming that you know the answer better than the customer as opposed to having the experience. So I think I'm much more, comes with age partly, comes with experiences. I'm much more reflective about those things now. And what I try to do as a leader now, encouraging that in my own leaders of my own team.
Okay, that's great. Now, in your own leadership journey, and you have worked with some great leaders throughout the career. In the book, I talk about 11 traits of leaders, being visionary, resilient, transparent communicator, ethical. In your opinion, of course, no leader has all of them. But in your opinion, what are some of the most important traits of leadership that you found to be the door openers and?
Well, I to the list you just meant, because I'm a big believer in the list you just said quickly. But I also happen to believe there's some additional elements or around human dimensions to those as well. And one of them that I carry very significantly, there's two in particular, one of which I carry very significantly is empathy. I think both as a marketer, it's important to carry empathy for your marketplace and for your consumer, but as a leader, as you're leading your team, leading with empathy. And I think what that does is it allows, this has been the bigger area that I focus on lately. When you carry that empathy, it makes it much easier to create an environment for vulnerability. And I happen to believe that you need empathy to unlock vulnerability, and I think you need to unlock vulnerability to remove fear of failure. Apparently easier to say. And that's a big one, because I don't believe you can achieve greatness in a culture and an organization where people are afraid to fail. And I believe in that so strongly that I have, in the organizations I have led, the last two, we actually celebrate failure. And we celebrate, right now in our organization, quarterly, we celebrate what we call amazing almosts. You can nominate someone who attempted to achieve something, and we say we're going to celebrate failing great. And I put those two words together intentionally, because I do believe there is a great way to fail. There's responsibility, there's accountability, you lay out your objectives, you involve other people, you brought them along the way, you measured the best of your ability, and it just didn't happen. And I think you have to celebrate those, because I guarantee you, if you look at any successful startup, the word pivot comes up for a reason. Pivot is a nice word for we failed on what we thought the business problem was. So let's pivot to find a place where we can be successful. So I think those aspects of you can't actually unlock the innovation you're talking about unless you do those things. You can't actually create empathy unless you're transparent. And you can't actually create vulnerability without all of those things. So I think when you allow those things to happen, and then the last one I put on there is empowerment. I'm very much a leader who believes in horizontal leadership. I'm not a fan of hierarchical structures. To the point, sometimes I make my own organization uncomfortable with my rejection of hierarchy. But I think those are the requirements to, and particularly in a world today, moving quicker, is you have to move.
Yeah, I think Richard Branson said, hire the best people and get out of their way.
100%.
No, I truly agree with you, because a failure teaches you a lot more than success does. So that's a great lesson. You started your career from the agency side. Last week in the classroom, we had a friend of mine who's the chief sales officer, growth officer for McCann, one of the largest agencies. And then you shifted towards the client side. The role of the agencies is constantly changing, but I think it's more demanding now. From a marketing perspective, using that lens, what are the values that you're seeing in relationship with agencies and the client side?
Look, I think the foundational ones have not changed. I don't think they've changed even since agencies were first created. So much of that ties to the relationship with people inside those agencies. But I think it's really important that you have those agency partners, because, it's a little bit like, if you're a doctor, you probably shouldn't be doing surgery on yourself. Right? You need someone who can have that alternative look and can bring that view into it. I'm also a big believer in the approach that you go about developing, along with that removal of fear or failure. You have to have tension. And it's just like, as you guys look at any of your creative solutions, it's one thing to have an insight. It's another thing to have like an insight that actually like creates some tension around it, and then create the message that actually draws you in. And so I think agencies are tremendous at holding the mirror up to clients. World-class agencies will hold a mirror up to the client and remind them, or tell them when they're wrong, or challenge them, encourage them to try different. Make no mistake, this is a tremendous success we are having at McDonald's right now. I could not do without our partners at White and Kennedy, and without our partners at Starcom. I do believe the media side in particular, as we started to play our first party data, has much creative tension in the work that they're doing now as the creative side did. And it's a question of, are you as a corporation going to allow those partners in? I think I believe clients get the work they deserve. And I think they get what they deserve based on the culture they create, environment and that accessibility they allow their partners to do. And are you prepared to embrace that? Now, that's a very personal point of view. You're gonna have leaders that believe you run the system. Agencies need to fit into that system. It's just never been my my path is generally, I like a little bit of that chaos inside of the structure.
You love those courageous conversations with
I do. I think that if you don't have somebody who's, thinking about the world differently, you are destined, and we've seen it, you're destined to create. And I would argue that's happened, actually what happened to McDonald's during a window of challenge for us. We followed our own path. And so today we talk about our success comes from having a conversation that's fan to fan with our customers, fans. I would argue we went through a window where we were brand to customer, brand to fan. And we were, anytime you're speaking at, you generally aren't hearing, generally not listening. And so I think agencies can play that role with you as well.
I think Lee Iacocca said it best, that if I'm surrounded by people who agree with me, I'm surrounded by the wrong people,
Yeah.
right? No, that's great. So let's shift the conversation to McDonald's. Such a global brand. That should be a liability as a chief marketing maven for an organization of that size. And that has been sustainable as a brand. But what are some of the challenges that you're seeing as a marketing head for the company?
It's interesting. And I remember when I was doing my interview to take the role and talking to Chris. For such a big, iconic global brand, I remember he said to me, he said, we're actually still in the infancy of becoming a brand. So when you look at the heart of what we actually do as a company, a franchise-based business, you look at what we do as a company. We essentially do real estate, we do supply chain, we do operations. And then as you as a franchisee, we are committed to then giving you a brand that you can then market, or you can then be successful under the arches. That's what we did really well, and we do very, very well. We weren't really leveraging that last piece of maximizing our marketing to best effect and really developing a brand. And that's what led us down a pathway, not quite 10 years ago, where we were becoming pretty transfixed on promotion, deal, transaction-based marketing. I think you saw this take place even in the direct consumer market. You look at a lot of the online brands. Great initial success until someone else like you comes into the category, and then you wake up one day and realize, oh, I'm a brand. Okay. And so Chris, when he started as president in the US, but certainly now as global CEO, talks a lot about how we maximize our market, and not just inside the company, but to the street. And so when you create that expectation with Wall Street, that actually that's one of your development drivers for growth. It creates accountability for us, which frankly in marketing I love, not to be in a position for that. But it changes the conversation, the role that marketing plays. And as we've now gotten into a data world where we can actually measure our results, and measure impact, we're now put into a place where we can actually show that return. So I would say I inherited the momentum of us starting to figure that out. People have done a lot of work prior to my getting there that laid the foundation to do that. That's on the sort of the operational side and how you be successful. I think from a brand side, it's never been more interesting and more exciting to build a brand as it is today, but it's also never been more fragile and more easy to slip off the edge, right? And think about the way we play. You can be hot and social today and you are canceled tomorrow, right? So the question of how do you maintain your place? What we have done, and when I joined the organization, we had just unlocked our connection, our reawakening of the brand, our connection back with customers with our Travis Scott famous order. And I remember when I joined, I said to the team, congratulations. This thing is iconic what you've just done from a connecting with fans, the business growth that you built around this idea. But you're a little like the dog who got the bus. Because you called culture, and now culture is called you back. Now you're now in culture. And so you now have to stay here. How are you going to be present? And so I think, and that's part of the excitement of it. And so for us, we are laser focused on, and that's our true north right now, is make McDonald a cultural icon. And then that's a big word, right? Everyone's talking about culture right now. So then we lay out very, very specifically, what do we mean by that? For us, it's 4 things. One, we're a food company, first and foremost. We need to influence the taste of culture. And we need to influence the changing taste of this country, the changing dynamics of the country, how that shows up. So it's little things like our famous Szechuan sauce, dipping sauce, right? But you're going to see us start to infuse that kind of change and taste of different cultures inside of the restaurant, the food itself. I do run menu, which is interesting, right? Because I get to not only influence the product, but then how we go to market. Second area is making sure how we show up in culture, showing up in the creative spaces where our fans are. So that's understanding the social spirits, understanding where to connect. The third area of culture, which sometimes has people scratch their head, is the use of data. And we do believe data is part of culture. We believe that data is a currency and a language, certainly for this generation, a digital first generation. It's how you use it, the value you create it, where it allows you to then create those long-term relationships, which I think brings the IMC evolution together in a way, to your point. And I loved what you said. It's truly about that technology and that data with the humanity. And that's where those come together. And the last thing is McDonald's, it's interesting. We weren't on our front foot, to be honest. And my belief was like, we're McDonald's, like 90% of the country comes through our doors once a year. We shouldn't just be participating in culture, we should be creating it. And we should be shaping culture. And so that's our core focus. And then as a leader, the challenge is stay on the beat. How do you stay focused on that over? Like I said to my team, we are going to get bored of our strategy before anyone else. Right. So that's the challenge, but I think quite often, again, if you go into it excited by the challenges, that's the stuff that gets you up every day.
I mean, that's the BHAG big promise, right? Interesting. So I'm going to leave the tougher question for the students, but I would tangentially touch on this generation, like we grew up in McDonald's, took our kids to McDonald's. They drifted away, right? The changing face of America, not only in ethnicity, but gender, lifestyle, every which way that you think. And, there are some interesting competition that have made a way. And their relationship with McDonald's is not what you and I used to have. So what are your marketing commandments to bring them back to the restaurants?
So I'm fortunate. The reality is the work that we've done over the last two years or so, it actually is this generation that's actually driving our success. And it's because we woke up and said, again, let's not talk brand to fan the way that we would have talked when we were kids. Let's actually have the conversation in a way that shows up how you guys actually talk to each other, not the brain, to each other. And so we started that journey in a very baseless, simple way. Goes back to those insights. Do you actually get back out and spend time in the market? So the team went on a road trip across the country. We spent time not just in McDonald's, but we spent time in Walmart's talking to moms about when they use it. We spent time in bars talking to young people about the role we play, about campuses, churches, because 15,000 franchisees are in communities. What role do you actually play? And we got back to something really, really, really obvious. It's like, if we spend time listening to what it is people actually love about their experiences with McDonald's and feed those back. Crazy thought, when you actually tell a customer how they think about things that they love about you in a way that's in the voice they tell, they actually respond, right? So that's where that pivot of fan to fan came. So if you look at all of our communication right now, it is all very much in a, we now know our tone. We now know sort of the fun we can have with it. We now know nuances and experiences that you guys talk about. We didn't create the idea that, if you go to buy fries and your friends tell you they don't want me, buy them fries because they'll eat yours, right? That wasn't from us. That was from talking to the people. And then we found a way to find the place to intersect with those who have an older experience with McDonald's and those with the newer. And the easiest example I can give you was last year when we did the Cactus Plant Flea Market collab, which was essentially the creation of an adult happy. And that came out of a tweet from 2 years earlier. It essentially said, one day you wake up, you didn't even realize you ordered your last happy. And that tweet went just completely viral, exploded. Well, what's behind that, right? If you dig into that from an insight perspective, it had that kind of visceral reaction. There is some childhood loss inside of that we thought was really powerful. And said, how do we solve it? Let's create a happy meal for adults. But then the question becomes, how does that go to market? And so Cactus Plant, who none of you will be surprised that when we presented this to our franchisees, had no idea who Cactus Plant was, had no idea why the McDonald Land characters had double sets of eyes. That wasn't for them. The insight was universal. Wrapping it around a part of culture, like Cactus Plant, the design world of Cactus Plant. It's for these guys, right? And it was the single largest selling month in the history of the business.
Wow.
So I laugh sometimes because it's actually far easier than we make it, right? It's the basics of what we like are actually learning. Power of insight, usage of the data, understanding where you shouldn't play, finding your voice, being consistent, and staying present. And like I said, now we can learn that faster than ever. And I can fail faster than ever with less damage too with data. Right?
I think the best ideas or insights don't usually come within the company, it comes from outside, right? And that's what you're learning.
I just grab that one for a second. I had a mentor who would have told you insights don't come from companies, facts come from companies, insights come from the market.
Interestingly enough, so the generation that we're facing right now, this is healthy America, right? And you're going to challenge your product and services, more so product. And this goes for our beverage industry, or, you know, what's on McDonald's strategic roadmap from that perspective, that how do we really connect? You know, once in a while it's fine, but they're very health conscious.
They are, but what I also love about them, you guys, I mean, I'm talking like you're not in the room all of a sudden. But what I love about this generation, you don't tell them how to be healthy. They determine what those elements look like for them. And so I'm healthy all week long, but if I've been out and had a great night out and I want some junk food, I'm gonna have some junk food.
It's great.
Right. And so, and by the way, I'll talk about other restaurants, right, what junk food are is spectacular. No, I think the point, I think the difference is we went through a phase of sort of directive health. And if you look the conversations we have today, it's actually not about health. It's about well-being and living and how you want to choose to live your life. And so if you look at failures on the menu from the past, it was when we attempted to be who we are not. And today the proliferation of offerings actually has helped us resist that thing to do again, right? You're not turning right to come to McDonald's for a salad. I can show you our previous failure in salads, right? To show you that. And that was enough offerings. You're gonna go to Sweetgreens, you're gonna go to another offer. So art of sacrifice has always been a critical part of what you do in marketing, in your strategy. So we know who we are. We strive to make sure that we have the best quality of the things that we do. We use great ingredients. We're not using preservative. I mean, so you play around the things that people care about to make sure that when they decide they want to have aspects where they indulge in their life, that's great. But you also recognize like value has always been at the heart of what we're about as a company and will continue to be, because we don't just represent young people with money to make choices to go anywhere they want. We also represent people who, frankly, $5 or $10 in their pocket need to get a good meal. And so recognizing again, when I say 90% of the country comes through our doors, I've got to think about that. That's the opposite of everything you guys learned, right? Is to have a target that's that broad. So we've got to think about how we do that. And what we have viewed that is that scale, we've actually pivoted. And we talk about that actually gives us a tremendous opportunity to democratize a lot of things people wouldn't have access to. So that's the lens we think into it.
That's a great point. And when I look at these faces, obviously that's the true representation of changing face of America. How do you plan to, when I walk into your restaurants, and it's a franchise model, I clearly understand, but at the same time, a lot of rules of engagement are dictated by McDonald's as a company. How do we bring the piece of belongingness, right? So if Lunar New Year is happening, I feel, if Ramadan, Diwali, Juneteenth, Women History Month, how do we bring that and humanize that? I really feel that, hey, they celebrate my culture, my existence, and everything that I value.
I think it's a tremendous opportunity to play around with a broader palette. So the way we approach it is we identify specific tent poles throughout the year that we're going to focus on. So for example, we have a national Lunar New Year program. But it's more than you got to care. It's one of those things where you can't just talk about it at a national level. It's got to show up in the communities that you're in as well. We have, and the way marketing actually, the way marketing works at McDonald's is I have a budget that's based on revenue from our franchisees. So I'm essentially spending other people's money, spending their money for them to be successful. It means I also have to participate with them, collaborate with them, and engage them in the decisions that we make. And we have very specific processes for how we go about doing it. In fact, when I leave all of you, I'm gonna be jumping on one of those calls with my franchise marketing committee, where we'll take them through plans for the year. Inside of that committee, we also have multicultural community committees that are designed to think about the core communities that we want to grow with and have relationships with. And we balance developing specific programming, whether that's last year we launched for the first time Spotlight Dorado, which is a content maker program for the Hispanic market, all being done under the guise that we know less than 1% of content, both in Hollywood and in the marketplace, comes from Hispanic creators. So we're leaning into that. We launched Future 22 last year. It's a way for us to go to the Black community and identify, great young leaders in entrepreneurial spaces and attach, scholarships to that. So we're looking for unique ways to participate in the community. And then you have to reflect on, forget the marketing with you for a second. I've got almost 15,000 stores with crew who are as diverse as they come. And so not only think about what we do with the customer market, how are we also supporting the amazing folks that work in our restaurants and make sure they feel like they're seen, make sure they feel like they're belonging, and we're spending a lot of time on programs, both at a national level that I support, but then also work with our franchisees to give them tools and resources to do those things.
Well, as a marketer, we're living in time which is very interesting and rapidly changing, right? I'm sure none of your 2 days are very similar, right? What are some of the marketing trends that you're seeing, not only QSR, industry outside, and with the role of artificial intelligence, metaverse, and ChatGPT now taking over at some point in time, and it's very uncertain. But as a marketer, how do you see the shifting from current model to what it's going to be in the future? What do you see in the short term and the long term?
Yeah, it's fascinating. I actually think a lot of the things that we're defining right now as creating uncertainty are ironically allowing us to reorganize our mix, the tools we have available to us in a more structured way than we ever have. So if you think about the use of whether you're talking about linear TV or over the top and streaming, on linear TV, we're actually now allowing, and by the way, it's still alive and well, like it's still part of plan, and there's a reason we're still doing it. And what's fantastic about it is we use it to do what was invented to do. Great breadth awareness. I'm no longer trying to pretend that I can put on these, linear programming, the ability to then attach to it, or back when I was starting the business direct marketing, we call it, right? But I can throw up an 800 number and allow it to be a direct response program. So, I can now use the data that I'm using online and the tracking I'm doing online. I can now use the mobile to do the effective things. I can now use our rewards programs and loyalty programs to target effectively. So in some ways, I actually think all of this madness around the technology and the data has actually helped us in many ways to be more disciplined about how to actually use tools. That's the first thing. In terms of the trends you're talking about, technology has been at the underpinning of it for a while. The data was there. We didn't have the pipes connected, right? So now the technology is catching up in a way that we can actually move the data through fast enough to actually react and actually have enough specificity that you actually care about the messaging that's coming. And so for me, that personalization, customization, top of the list, we're spending a ton of time on it. It's the easiest thing to potentially open up for growth, and equally the easiest thing for you to do completely wrong and alienate your customers. And so again, how do you use data in a way that creates value and they want to be part of? I'm totally, this is where I'll geek out a little bit. I totally am excited about the whole aspect of AI. I'm equally horrified about the responsibility and the potential concerns that come with it. But if we behave responsibly, the ability to use AI, and not just around the creation. You're seeing really fun stuff with ChatGPT, and certainly things we'll be able to do on our own messaging to target. That stuff's great. I think that's going to happen way faster than people think. It's actually going further though, using really going to the next generation, start looking at the generative AI and what's happening in that space and how that data learns on itself, and how I'm able to now apply that in areas around mobile marketing and areas around geo relationships. And again, if I come back to that data, if I can create a relationship with data that you see value in, I believe permissions will come, because we're going to run into a privacy world. And I actually am it goes back, you are talking about
Regulation.
I actually think that's the best thing that could happen. Because now I have to do something that you want to participate in. With my team, I talk about creating sign-in value. Right? Because if you guys love something on your phone, that app's on there because it's fitting into something that you do an everyday part of your life. When it's not, it's gone. So if I understand what the value is required for me to get that sign-on contract from you in a way that you love it, you're giving me a roadmap to understand you and continue to add that value. We've never had that, right? Or let me rephrase it, in the past when we had it, growing up when I in the industry, I didn't have it until 3 to 6 months later, at best, if I could measure it, right? Looking back at my rearview mirror. Today, I can do that looking forward with the algorithms and the projections that come with AI. That's crystal ball stuff that sorry, you guys, that's to me is like so exciting to do there.
I think the shift has changed that we used to fight. It's all about real estate at the end of the day, right? But that real estate has now come on the screen through an app, right? That how do you create that you become a keeper, not a deleter? Okay, I know I have a few minutes before I go back to the students. Let's talk about, the advice from your perspective to the students who are sitting in, and we talked about it earlier that 20 years ago, we wanted a marketing major to be in a marketing position. Today, we love the music majors and, we'll teach them marketing. What advice do you have for them? How can they make themselves more valuable as marketers when they walk into these companies?
Look, I think we were talking before the class started. I think we're going to go through our own rebranding as an industry here because the role of what we do as marketers today is just so much more than the customer. The role that I play inside of our organization to not only influence the product, but to also at the table with my partners, determine our, ultimately our CRM strategy in the organization, which then leads to impacting our technology infrastructure, which then leads to, customer service. For example, I ran in my old organization where the midst of transferring customer service into my organization. That's part of the relationship extension. You will, as marketers, have much more audiences to be based on to drive your success than just the external customer audience. And I believe it's critical for marketers to think about as much about the internal brand of the organization and what you're trying to do to lead the organization as it is how that then translates into what you're doing externally with your customer. You are going to be tied to aspects of corporate reputation, brand trust, in ways that we've never had to deal with. And by the way, I blame all of you for that because you all care about it and you know how to go into social spheres to find out whether we're telling the truth or lying to you. And you guys go deep and you call us on it, which is awesome. For the companies to really think about the soul of their brands, the soul of their products, and the truths and the realities of it, right? So the thinking that you have to come in as a marketer, if I really am honest about it, I spend almost the least amount of my time on our products these days, which is kind of funny when I think about what I would have done coming into the industry, right? The amount of time we would have spent looking for that, the reason to believe on every product and what's my support for every product and what, those things are all critical. They're basal, right? They're important, but that's not where you win and lose it. Right? I can have an amazing product if I don't understand you and connect with you on levels that have nothing to do with it. You don't make it.
I always say that, don't look at artificial intelligence as a competition. This is an ally, right?
100%.
And don't forget the original intelligence, right? You have that. The humanization that can be beaten and the understanding the emotions. I love going.
Before you leave, I actually think that will be something all of you will carry into your careers as a responsibility. I mean, the responsibility I had was being around products and making sure they were safe, trying to be responsible in the communication we had, trying to be open and honest. The responsibility you all are going to have to carry beyond just privacy around the interrelationship between the use of technology and its positive aspect on humanity and the potential negative and damaging is a high potential risk for you guys, for your generation, and starting to think about early environmental issues were probably in my. And I think the difference is the environmental stuff, it wasn't directly in the wheelhouse. I think we were quite often in the mix to try to figure out how to talk about it. This is going to be in your wheelhouse. You guys will be responsible for being called out as the work that you did, having either positive or negative impact on your communities based on the work you did. And I think that's exciting, but I think it's a real responsibility.
It is, and it's a debt commitment. I love going to the home office because I can get the international menu at the restaurant. Any plans to pilot that elsewhere?
No, and the simple answer is because it's not as easy as it looks.
It is, I know that the
And
challenge.
and it's also a little bit of the uniqueness. You come to, Tariq's referencing, if you come to our Chicago home office, we have a global restaurant where every month we rotate out products from around the world on the menu. And we don't mostly because the complexity, and it can sound like it's really easy, and believe me, since I've joined, the number of requests I've had for people to put things on the menu. I'm never at a short list. I think you all would like me to put back on the menu. It's easy to do it, but it's hard to actually operationalize it
I know.
in that back of that kitchen and make sure that you still get the same food, the best quality you want. With a crew, just to put that in context in the world you guys live in, 2 years ago. This is 24 months, McDonald's essentially had 2 channels. We had a drive-through and we had a front counter. And since then, we now have drive-through, a front counter, menu boards in the restaurant, so either use a cashier or I don't. I have an app, I have third-party delivery through Uber or DoorDash, or I can order direct on the app. I have curbside pickup, and I now, as of this month, we've launched Ready on Arrival. So you place your order, you get inside of a geofence, and it's waiting when you get the parking lot. That's in 2 years, right? And the complexity, that alone, just on the channel proliferation that creates for our crew. I think you'll be waiting. You'll have to go to Japan.
Supply chain.
For the burger that you're looking for, that you like on our global menu.
Okay, before I go to the student Q&A, one personal question.
Yeah.
You married to a person who is the chief marketing officer of JP Morgan. Is this an arranged marriage or? It's too good to be true.
Look, it's funny you actually use that phrase because she actually ended up right after I met her, she ended up at PepsiCo because I introduced her to Mary Dillon, who's now the CEO of Foot Locker. I thought, she'd be an awesome role model. And Mary ended up scooping her up from Kellogg's like 3 months before we got married. So I came back from my marriage with a wife and a new client because I realized the strategy. I was in the agency world. And by the way, she's a much better marketer than me as well. So
We'll find out. We'll invite her to NYU. So let's open up Q&As. Here are the rules of engagement. Kindly stand up, announce your name, and keep the questions brief because we want to get as many questions as possible in the next 10 minutes. So, Tariq.
Hi, I'm Freddie. I listened to the podcast you did with Antonio Lucio with your wife, and I was really interested by it overall, especially as an investment partner also in the marketing field. So I wanted to know, how have you guys best supported each other's kind of professional careers throughout the year, and how much do you bring kind of work home and bounce ideas off each other?
So it's really funny. You like found that one social podcast. It is the only time, literally, that Carla and I have done anything together. We tend to deliberately keep our professional careers heavily separate. This is probably the most I've even talked about it. And that's mostly because it's a small industry to begin with, and so your ability to maintain your own identity and the things you're trying to do, and I think that's particularly true of respecting the pathway of female executives, that we deliberately to keep those things separate. But I think I all joking aside, I think it started from early on when literally her organization was my client, and so we kind of had this unwritten rule that by the time you roll into the garage, conversations for work are over. That isn't to say that we still don't sit there, watch TV and critique every other marketing meeting. But for the most part, I think the support comes from identifying the goals of the other, respecting the pathways that they're on. And I do think actually maintaining the, that respect of who you are. We'll get these comments around like, I think Antonio even asked as a joke at the beginning of it, power couple. We both like that phrase makes me want to vomit because it doesn't make sense. We're actually not a power. If we were in a company together, then great. But the reality is he's an incredibly capable, experienced, and successful marketer, completely irrespective of, right? And so that I feel those things are really, really important. They should kind of allow yourselves to maintain identities. And then of course, everyone, just like you do when all your relationships come home day to day, that things are either going right or you need a point of advice on something. You ask, like I said, you're a better marketer, so she's me asking a question.
Thank you. Who wants to go next? Devika.
Hi, my name is Devika. I really liked what you said about the whole being the forefront of culture. I didn't grow up in the US, and a lot of the places I grew up in, McDonald's wasn't a part of the culture. A lot of times if you saw someone in McDonald's, they were a tourist or maybe outside of the culture. So how do you position yourself to be at the forefront of culture outside of just like the products?
Look, I think, we are doing a better job of the products, so that's part of the reason why he wants to come to Chicago and chase some of that menu, because we are allowing, the markets to put their local spin on things, put a cultural spin on it that makes sense for them. Secondarily, depending on the market you're in, working with our franchisees to really embrace that they're part of those communities, and how they connect in those communities. You know, we're a big company, but at the end of the day, we're also very small local companies in terms of how we show up. And then you're starting to see, and you will continue to see in our market. We've been a pretty decentralized organization in terms of how we showed up. Core things about the brand showed up, but pretty decentralized in how to show up in the market. And increasingly, we're starting to work as a global marketing leadership to codify some of these elements of culture that we're talking about. But I would also tell you, I think, you know, the disconnect in your culture was actually not that different than the fading connect in the US, because globally, we were starting to spend our time spending too much time talking about the food and the price, and not enough time actually connecting with the culture, the community, and the market. Thank you.
Next, and speak louder, please, Vikas, and then.
Hi, my name is Vikas. I grew up in a culture where going to McDonald's was like, even we used to look forward to the weekends, our parents used to take us, unlike states, we used to enjoy. Wherever I've been to, the brand and specifics amazing about McDonald's. When I moved to US, I wanted to have my own business, and I was really planning to go and buy a franchise from McDonald's and just research. To be honest, it was out of my league, so I said, they kept following on the numbers. So, because my wife was in the finance industry and we do investment and put around thing. So last week I came up with quite strange kind of thing which I couldn't understand. And luckily we were coming Friday last week. The biggest competitor is Chick-fil-A for McDonald's in the US. One outlet of Chick-fil-A makes around 8 million as compared to McDonald's, which makes 4 million. Which was like, I couldn't comprehend, it didn't make sense to me. And the franchise setup fee for McDonald's is twice the amount as compared to Chick-fil-A. So it felt like they are outnumbering you on every front. Being a marketing student, and you all know, you as a marketing leader, how would you, knowing that the tough times, recession economy is where the market is going down, how would you navigate your way, and what suggestion recommendation would you give to us as a marketer that we can learn from you?
I'm pausing to figure out what I can say here. Just from a franchise agreement perspective, but here's what I'm not going to focus on us as much. Actually, I think you're looking at the numbers vis-a-vis how the press presents them. If you actually look at this, you know, I tell you to go back and look at Chick-fil-A, it's actually not a traditional franchise agreement. And so the profitability share that you're quoting is not an apples to apples. What I would tell you is, without getting in the stuff that will get me in trouble with the SSC and the legal team back home, we are the most profitable for a franchisee, not the franchisor, than any franchise out there. But you've got to look at the construct of it. You have to look at things like how many franchises can a Chick-fil-A owner own? One. You have to look at how the construct, very good, by the way, someone called that out, thank you for doing your homework. It's always good to have backup in the crowd too. So
Validates you.
thank you, right? And you have to go deeper into understanding what the construct of fee versus profit on the margin. So it's a little more complex. I'll stand by the idea that we believe we are the single best franchise opportunity.
Thank you.
It's a great question, and thanks for doing your homework.
So in the classes, he mentioned that brands need to compete on either product, price, or service. So what do you think is regards to competing on? Because personally, I think some is competing on POV, but majorly it's competing on brand value.
So it's a great question, and I grew up in the era of, you know, the 3 Ps of marketing kind of mindset. I don't think you can win on one anymore. I tend to agree with what you're saying, and if I actually look at those we compete with today, you can't win on just great product anymore. At the same time, you can't have a great place with lousy product. And even if you do both of those two really, really well, if I don't find a way to connect with you beyond the food and the service itself, I need to find a deeper way. And that's why the role of culture I'm mentioning is so significant in terms of the role that we're playing. I'll give you an example. You guys get into the notion of like brand building versus performance marketing. Okay. So you will never hear me talk about versus. I don't believe in brand versus performance marketing. I believe in brand performance. On the example I'll give you is last summer, we had a window where the objective was to put 2 million new users onto the app. And just believe me when I tell you that's a big audacious number. When my team brought the number, I thought we were crazy. The program they developed to do that was a 30-day program we called Camp McDonald's. Each week there was a different food hack, a promotion, merchandise, and every weekend ended with an in-app concert. Into that 30-day window, tease my team, they put 1.999 customers on. We didn't quite make 2 million. I told them to lie to me. I'm like, just add one more. You made your 2 million. But that was an acquisition program. I don't think if I went and talked to one of those 2 million customers that went on the app, that they would have described themselves as ending up on the app because we did a promotion to acquire them. I mean, it's a horrible concept to begin with, right? Who wants to be acquired? They had an experience, right? There was some value inside of the app that led them. They could only do it through the app that had them say that's going to work for me. So I think wrapping around understanding what your objectives are, again, go back and understanding who your customer is, and then what's the right experience that you're creating around them, leveraging the areas that you talked about, product, price, promotion, through those. I think the orchestration, and by the way, a lot more fun to develop programs to do that.
We are just about,
One final question for prospective students.
Yeah.
I was impressed, you didn't do an MBA, you chose to do a specialized master's in integrated marketing communications, like the future leaders of tomorrow here. For prospective students, why specialized professional master's and not an MBA?
I'll give you the humorous response first. I probably wouldn't have gotten into an MBA. He wasn't smart enough. Oh, no. When I looked at the program, I knew I didn't want to go pure finance, and I was interested in the way they talk about marketing, but it was missing something for me that I now can articulate. I didn't really understand at the time that the role of the consumer and consumer insight and the role of communication overlaid on top of those things was actually where part of my passion was, and I actually think has made me become an even better marketer. From that perspective, if I knew what I knew now, I would have made the same decision twice on Sunday because of the role that we're talking about right now. How do I take this intersection between data and still maintain a human connection to it? I would tell you that there was something about that orchestration, understanding the mix, but also then understanding how to take that through to what that Batman early lifetime value kind of thinking was. But the element of the creativity of taking it through to execution, I think ultimately, as I look back now, I don't know if I knew that at the time, but I think that ability to actually get your hands dirty and play around with, okay, so now what? Was probably what interested me at the time. What I would, and I said this would be in class, I'm using more of my skills today that I learned, I'll date myself, in 1994. But I also look back at the leaders that were teaching at that time. And like, Don Schultz, who I mentioned, was a core mentor for me. Like, he, for me now, like, he had some crazy crystal ball of the world that in my mind, I don't even know how they knew this notion of what was direct marketing. And they were talking about this data was going to be available, and eventually we figured out how to tie it together. He passed away a few years ago. I think he wouldn't be surprised, and at the same time would be amazed at the potential. And so I think it was that connectivity of it. Having said that, part of what you're going to have to face when you go out there, just in fairness to all of you, is you're going to have to explain what is IMC. Because we were talking, we as an industry have done the best job of really explaining. People get too focused on the communication piece and they forget the integrated marketing piece. And MBAs equally, they now know what that is. So there is going to be a churn out there where you have to sort of get So get your comments down on that as to why you should be considered for roles where they traditionally think about MBAs. I think you're an MBA with a point of view of the marketplace that is very, very different than when you get a traditional MBA course.
Well, Martin, that's a great commercial for our students, right? Our time is up and I just want to give you this book. I recently